Hi, I'm Matt Lehrman. Each week on Community Catalysts, we explore the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. Well, back in February, I had the chance to sit down with Mayor Brian Vincent of Farmville, Virginia. We talked about how his approach to public service is shaped by the principles of stoicism, virtue, self-discipline, and wisdom. But as rich as that interview was, he and I continued to talk even after the episode ended, and the mayor shared a deeply personal reflection on his father's military service and sacrifice and the meaning of Memorial Day. Honestly, this was just too important to leave on the editing room floor. So with Memorial Day approaching, let's all take a moment to reflect, to honor those who gave their lives in service to our country. Their sacrifice sets the ultimate bar for leadership, the kind that demands selflessness, courage, and an unwavering commitment to something greater than oneself. Our responsibility today isn't just to remember them, but to preserve and advance the democratic values that they defended, to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. With deep respect and appreciation, here's Mayor Brian Vincent in his own words. This was an emotionally resonant conversation, and I'm really grateful to you for it.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny, you think, I was 14 when my father was killed. 48 now. How quickly, it always amazes me how quickly that emotion can come right back into full.
How old was your dad when he was killed?
He was 38.
And do you know where and what the situation was?
So he was the commanding officer of a special operations aviation unit. So he flew the tiny little attack helicopters. And so they were training for the first Gulf War. And at least what I know is what happened is they were running real world simulation attacks. And so they're in these tiny little attack helicopters. His team's doing rounds and they come in these tight corners in these big tree-lined attack environments. And they came in and fired on the target and then circled out. And as they circled out, they radioed to a tower asking for permission to come through the shortcut instead of going the long way to take another practice round. And according to everything, they got that permission, but there was some confusion because somebody else had gotten permission to go the other way. And so 2 helicopters coming in a tight confine, and they don't know whether it was my father or the other gentleman who was flying, who was actually had their hand on the stick, but whoever it was saw the other helicopter at the last second because it's at night and they're in night vision goggles. And back then, night vision goggles didn't provide as much peripheral view. They're very tight. And so last second, and they banked out of the way, slammed into some trees, and the impact of all that killed both of them instantly. And my dad's guys had to carry him out of there. And so, yeah, that was, when it was published in the paper, it was listed that he was killed in, I think it was Kentucky or something and all this, but yeah, his aviation unit was the aviation unit that got invited to become Delta Force's aviation unit. So Delta Force is the highly secretive unit in the Army. His unit was of their own, not recognized by the military, doing their own thing. Delta said, will you guys come in and be our aviation unit? And they wanted my dad's whole team to go through their selection process, which is a very lengthy and kind of brutal selection process. And they told him he was grandfathered in as the commanding officer. And he was like, no, I'll go do it with those guys. So he went and did the whole selection process with them. And I can remember him coming home from that, being gone for 2 months. And his feet were just jet black. They had dropped him in the middle of the woods to start it all off with just their boots on, no socks, and just told him to walk. and they walked for like days, and then they eventually get captured, and then they get tortured, and seeing how far they can take them before they break, or if they will break. And so I just remember him being exhausted when he got back. But so, those are the things that informed, like my life.
He sounds like a tough, courageous, badass kind of guy. As you knew him, as a young boy, did you know that about him, or was he just dad to you?
No, much like my wife speaks of me. Like my wife and kids would tell you, like, they consider me very intimidating, right? Like, because I'm quiet, and you can, like, I'm a fairly stocky, well-built gentleman, like my dad was. So he was quiet, he was well-built, he was a pretty cerebral guy. So he could be intimidating at times. And it wasn't that he didn't, like, similar to me, like, I'm not a yeller. He wasn't a yeller. But there was like this intensity that was like, woo. So he had that factor, but he could also be extremely loving and fun, which were things my mom imparted more on him, and that he embraced. He was willing to change and try to adapt. And so, like, I can, with he and I, it was a lot of, foot races across parking lots, and going to work out together where we'd listen to music and talk about, like, my mom will tell you, she used to always yell at him, like, everything doesn't have to be a life lesson. But, like, that's the way he interacted with me a lot. But he could also be, like, I tell my kids all the time, because I have a teenager who's very apt to get grossed out if she sees my wife and I, like, embrace, she's like, hey, you guys get a room. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're going to one day really appreciate that. Like, I know from growing up, like, I would come home and find my mom and dad, like, cuddling on the couch, And it was like, that's pretty cool. Like, my parents love each other, And, like, my dad's this tough guy who has no qualms showing emotion and being affectionate, So that's what
you mentioned, was it visiting his grave twice a year, or celebrating him twice a year?
Yeah. So yes, celebrating him twice a year, on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death. Yeah.
So, for you, because his memory is so important to your drive for public service and the like, for you, every day is Veterans Day in a sense. But I wonder, on Veterans Day itself, what do you hope that other people would remember about your dad and other people who served?
So for Veterans Day, I'm actually in a different mode usually. So Veterans Day, recognition of veterans, we're often celebrating my stepfather. So my stepfather, my mom remarried years later to another gentleman who went to West Point Army Academy, actually served as a doc in the same unit my dad was in. They passed paths.
They knew each other?
They knew each other a little bit. Yeah, not deeply, but they knew each other a little bit. And he's an amazing individual. Just one of the really great human beings. And so we celebrate him, and we celebrate some of my uncles and my grandfather who all served. And we do recognize my dad, but Memorial Day is really the day, that's dedicated to the memory of those who lost their lives. And that day, and that weekend, more importantly, is one that has a real resonance with me. So I've written editorials about it for the paper, and I talk often about, like, the importance of, we're all going to revel in Memorial Day, and like, people will celebrate it, and get their barbecue on, and that's great, and we should. And that's what I always say, like, you should do all those things that remind you that the country we live in affords us a lot of opportunity and is a great place.
And that life is worth living.
Yeah. But let's also take a moment in that day or in that weekend to just reflect on the people, who made that sacrifice.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing it, Brian. I really, it's great. It's great that you can talk about it. It's great that I can learn from it. And I'm just so honored and grateful that you allow me to share this with others as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.